Good morning and welcome to another conversation with Mose. And as always, I pray life is treating you well wherever you are in the world and that you're one day closer to your dreams and prayers coming true. Of course, my podcast wouldn't be a podcast without a poem. And this poem is called Phenomenal Man. It is taken from my book, Call Me Junie, available now where books are sold. I am a courageous man. I am a faithful man. I am a praying man. I am a loving man. I am forever a student. I am a teacher for those willing to learn from my experiences. I am an instrument used by my Creator to add color to the lives of others. I am a dreamer, a man who still believes in angels and miracles, a man who believes the impossible is possible. I am a poet, a man who knows the power of words. I am a man not afraid to cry, not afraid to show emotion, not afraid to say, I love you. I am a man who dares to be different. I am a man who walks with his head held high. I am a man who seeks the face of God in others. I am amazing. I am powerful. I am hopelessly devoted to honoring my soul self, allowing my life to unfold for the world to see. I am a phenomenal man. That's me. And of course, I wanted to also pay homage to the late, great Maya Angelou. I figured since everybody was quoting Phenomenal Woman, I thought I'd write my own version called Phenomenal Man. And I truly believe that about myself. And sometimes we have to encourage ourselves to basically just remind us of who we are. And which brings me to my subject matter for the day. And it's called My Great Aunt Pam. And she's not actually my great aunt. She's actually my aunt, my mother's sister. But I'm calling her great because she was. And she was a great influence on my life and still is. And I'm influenced. One of the reasons I wanted to do a podcast on Aunt Pam was because I was listening to Renaissance, and Beyonce's really been talking about her Uncle Johnny and her influence in her life and on this particular record. And I wanted to do the same thing and really discuss and talk about my aunt and how she just wasn't an ordinary woman to me. And she's very influential in the person that I am today. And I wouldn't be me if I didn't mention her as part of the tapestry of my life. I mean, if there was no Aunt Pam, I definitely wouldn't be who I am without her influence. And as I said, this is my mom's sister, her younger sister. And I lost my Aunt Pam in 2014. It was actually an Easter Sunday, and it was my parents' I think it was their 45th wedding anniversary. So it was all in one day. I had just sold my house and I moved into an apartment, and she literally died the very next day after I had moved out of my home. So it was a really life-changing moment. It was one of those moments that I wasn't expecting. I mean, nobody knew she was ill. It was kind of suddenly. And it was really one of those life-changing, like, ripple effects. And suddenly she was gone. And honestly, ironically, I had moved closer to her because I had been contemplating leaving Atlanta, and I wanted to get more of her input on where I should go. And I did get a chance to see her like a week before, and she asked me for some Mexican food. She wanted some Mexican food. So I actually went, me and my other aunt Linda, and we went to get her some. I mean, I knew it probably wasn't a good idea, but, my Aunt Pam wanted the food, and my parents were here, and we were visiting her. So I did get a chance to spend some time with her. But let me go back in time first. My Aunt Pam was, actually, she's the only one to graduate from college in her family. And she went to the military. She was very adventurous. She always had an afro. I remember my first time seeing her. Uh, she always rocked the afro and the braids. She was always kind of a very, not militant, but she just always did her own thing. And she's just 10 years older than me. So she was more like a big sister than an aunt. But she got stationed in Hawaii. She lived in Texas. She kind of lived all over. And actually, I believe she lived out of the country for a spell as well. But she always came back to Dayton, which is where we're from, Dayton, Ohio. And when I became a teenager, I wanted to write songs. And there was a period where I was writing poetry, but I was writing songs, and she helped me kind of arrange them. I guess I was like maybe 14, 15. So I'd go over her house and we'd sing, and we just. So she really, what I loved about our relationship is that she always encouraged me to try something, and she was always there to me and my cousins and my sister and brother. She could be a little pushy at times, but in hindsight, now that I'm an uncle, I can see what her intentions were. And even though I didn't always like her methods or her approach, I miss it, and it's just kind of ironic that she was so good at planting seeds. And she actually, well, let me back up a little bit. When I moved to Atlanta when I was 18, her and my mom came down to visit me that first year I was there. And they had a really good time. They came, they met my roommate, and they spent time with me. And it was cool because I really missed them, of course. And that following year, she came down. She decided she liked Atlanta, and she came to right after me. I believe she came in 87. I was there in 86. So she moved to Atlanta to spend time with me and just kind of keep an eye on me and make sure I was okay. And like I said, in hindsight, I didn't think of it as a big deal, but now looking back on it, that was a big deal. She literally moved to Atlanta because of me. And like I said, I don't know what my life would be like if she didn't do that. And, especially moving to Atlanta and as green as I was, and becoming a man was really challenging for me. I had never lived anywhere else. And like I said, I was as green could be. And she was there to really kind of guide me, kind of like a guardian angel. But again, at the time, I always thought she was just always hovering and always so, just getting on my nerves being a young man. I just thought, and then I was coming into my sexuality, and she wasn't aware of that. Hell, I wasn't even aware of it myself. So we went through our highs and lows, and I just remember learning about racism. One story in particular that I might have shared earlier, but on another podcast. But I remember losing a job. I got fired from a job. And I can be real transparent. There was a young man that lied on me that I had met. And he started working at the same job I was working at. And he said I was helping him steal. And I was interrogated by the store police or security, and they said I was a big mastermind behind this, theft ring at this job. And I believe I was like 19 or 20. And I was devastated. I mean, here I am being accused of a crime. Somebody's telling me that I did something that I didn't do. So my Aunt Pam, I told her about it. So she said, we're going to go back up there. So she insisted I dress up. So she put on a suit, and we went to meet with the manager. And I remember her saying that she was with the EEOC. And, this is my nephew. And he's told me that, I'm trying to understand why he would get fired. And of course, she made this scene. She was very cool and calm. And I remember at the time, I really didn't know what the EEOC, and to be real honest, I totally don't know what they actually do, what their role is. But the manager backed down, and she offered me my job back. And I thought it was so amazing that she went into this autopilot, and she went in there and defended me. And she believed me. I mean, she knew I didn't do it. She never once questioned me in terms of stealing. And, she never asked me a whole lot of questions. She just knew. And I'll never forget that. It was kind of like an Olivia Pope type moment. And I remember when I started pursuing music. I moved there to be in the music industry, and I lived with my aunt Pam for, I guess, about a year. And I had got an interview with A&M Records as an intern, and I remember us sitting on the floor praying about it. And she said, "You're going to get that job. You're going to get that internship." So we sat on the floor, we held hands, and we prayed. And of course, I got the job. And I couldn't be more excited. This is my first year in Atlanta, and I got an internship at A&M Records. And she was, like I said, a big cheerleader for me. And I had a birthday party that same week. It was my birthday. It was my 20th birthday. And I just got the internship. And I got a check in the mail before I even started the job. So it was a big deal. Well, I'm sorry. I was an intern at A&M Records, but I got a job at BMG Distribution. And I was going to actually be getting paid as an intern. So it worked out. And she knew I could do it. She just kind of encouraged me. And so when I got the job, we had a birthday party / celebration. And I was feeling myself. Honestly, I was feeling myself. And I was going through I don't know, I was, again, I guess just having an attitude, thinking I was just, all that. And I was really getting the big head and really, like I said, feeling myself. And I remember us getting into an argument in the middle. And I was drinking. Don't know nothing about alcohol, but I'm just drinking like a fish. And again, just happy. So we got into an argument in her apartment in the middle of this party. And I think I called her every name in the book, told her she wasn't my mother. And again, and she ended up hitting me. We fell down some stairs. I mean, it was awful. I mean, I really, to this day, I'm really embarrassed to even talk about it because I lost my temper, literally lost my temper. And it was just, ironically, my mother had suggested that we don't live together. And my aunt was like, "Oh, we'll be fine. And we were. But keeping in mind, my aunt was 28. No, she was 30 and I was 20. And my aunts, if you met any of my aunts, they just don't play that. So we had a serious altercation and she put me out. Literally, I had just got that job and I got put out. So I used the money that I got from my internship and I got my first apartment. But we went through a period where we didn't talk for a while because I know she was really angry with me. And like I said, in hindsight, I probably was more embarrassed and ashamed that I would call her the names that I did. And she had been so good to me pretty much my whole life. And I know it hurt her. And even though she forgave me and we became friends again, I know it hurt her for me to say some of the things that I said to her. And which brings me to my point, when I've always had a temper, and I really have a lot of respect for people that have loved me through my troublesome childhood and teenage years. My aunts, my uncles, specifically on my mom's side, they all saw me grow and change. And even though they weren't perfect, I guess with my Aunt Pam, she really saw the good in me and she fought for me. And I really, again, looking back, you have to have somebody in your life outside of your parents, of course, if you're blessed to have supportive parents, to support you and encourage you. And I actually had the pleasure of loving her and her being a part of my life through some really challenging moments. I remember one time my partner, who's now deceased, we used to live next door to each other. And I worked at a store down the street. And he had the key to my apartment, so he would come in and out of my apartment. He had something he was putting in my apartment. And my Aunt Pam saw him coming out of my apartment. And he went in his apartment and she asked him, "What are you doing coming out of my nephew's apartment?" And of course, he closed the door and was like, "You need to ask your nephew." And so he called me at work to tell me my Aunt Pam came by my apartment. And of course, she comes down to the job and she's just fussing. And who's this guy coming out of your apartment? And at the time, she didn't know, this was my partner, but I wasn't ready to share that. But I fussed at her for going over there without calling. And and again, it was just her being protective of me. And it's just weird now that I couldn't see how overprotective she could be of me and how she knew how naive I was. And again, I always beat her up about it, and it's like I just kind of, again, just feels kind of weird now. I can look back clearly and see how much she was trying to help me. And some things, again, she was right about. She'd warn me about different people that I'd be around. She'd kind of tell me to watch people and be careful. And I thought she was just being meddlesome. Oh, you just don't know what you're talking about. And I guess if you look, I mean, the people in your life, the aunts, the uncles, the godfathers, the godmothers, they really do have the best of intentions. And sometimes we have to step back and put ourselves in their position. Because I love being an uncle. I really, really do. And I try to treat them the way my Aunt Pam treated me, but I try not to be fussy. But at the same time, I want them to know if I'm telling them something or if I'm giving them wisdom, why I'm telling them that, what my intention is. And if you're a young adult, I'm going to treat you like a young adult. And she did the same thing with me. She was very honest. Matter of fact, one of her best friends from college and high school was my senior teacher. She was I believe she was my English teacher, one of her best friends, and I wasn't doing well in that class. And I remember my teacher talking to Miss Annie was talking to my Aunt Pam about my grades. And I remember Aunt Pam calling me and saying, I told her not to give you any special treatment because you're my nephew. You really need to do well in this class. I mean, I need you to step up and handle your business. And again, in hindsight, I can see she really believed in me even more than I believed in myself. And she took me to my first concert at 16. When I did my first showcase, she paid for the video. I mean, when it was a videographer, she paid for it. She really put her money down on me, and she bet on me. But the biggest thing I miss the most is her prayers. I was going through a really rough time at a job that shall remain nameless, and I was dealing with a racist manager, very horrific man, and I was trying not to quit this job. There were times I wanted to quit, and I would call her and tell her what's going on. I'd be crying, and I'd be truly upset. And the one thing I love about Aunt Pam, she would stop whatever she was doing, find somewhere to go, and she would literally pray with me about it because she knew how I was trying to control my temper. I was really trying to control my temper, and she was really helpful with that. And we would pray, and she would just kind of have these really long but short prayers on how to get through that moment. And it's interesting. Again, I still hear her voice, even when I'm in situations that I'm uncomfortable, I'm upset. And she wasn't my mom, but she was an extension of my mom. I kind of felt like she could be more objective because she wasn't my mom. And she loved my writing. She was the first person in my family to read one of my poetry books in its entirety. And she actually came to one of my poetry events too, which was weird for her because she had stopped going to the club. So she actually came to a club to see me do my poetry with her husband. And I was so happy to see her. She sat in the front row, and I can't tell you even now looking back on it, she's always been a supporter of Mose Hardin Jr. And I know she was my mom's sister, but and she lived in Atlanta for as long as I did, over 30 years. So it was easy to move once she passed away. It was easy to make that transition because I had no longer, even though I had a wonderful time there, it was time for me to go. But in talking about Aunt Pam, I just want you to take stock and inventory of your life if you have an Aunt Pam in your life or an Uncle Johnny. And like I said, I pride myself on being a good uncle, and not perfect, but I try to be there for my nieces and nephews the best way I can. And of course, the things that I didn't like being a nephew to my Aunt Pam, I try to be even better. But I try to give them advice the way she gave, the way she gave me advice, confident and encouraging. And I know to this day, even with some of the challenges I've faced now, what she would tell me to do. I think the main thing she'd tell me to keep trusting God, even though things might not look or feel the way you want them to. And that I know she's with me. I do. I don't have any doubts in my mind. And even though it's been challenging at times, really mentally, emotionally, financially, and then the other thing, I always honor her because I don't want to, quote unquote, embarrass her memory or to do something that I know she would be waving her hand at me like, why did you do that? I mean, I know she still love me, but I can hear her say, you know better than that, Junie. And it's now I'm in a space there. Sometimes, matter of fact, my book, Call Me Junie, I wrote that book after she died. And it was more like I took my energy and I just put it into that book. And I dedicated that book to her. And it's so ironic because that's the one book I don't pick up very often. Because I was in such a dark place when I was writing that poetry. And some of the poetry in there is pretty dark. It's not all dark, but it is one of those books that I was really, really in a very sad place. And with all of my books, I could pretty much tell you where I was mentally, what I was going through. But also, I have to share a story that she was also there for me when I had my cancer. And this week, actually next week, will be my 12-year anniversary of being cancer free, which I'm truly, truly happy and truly thankful for. But she was there for me, playing video games with me, and just, so positive, so positive. And again, she went in autopilot. If I needed anything, she was just, let me help you. And I remember her husband coming over to cut my grass. She made him cut my grass because I couldn't keep up with my house because I was in recovery. And at the time, I just felt like she was so smothering, and I hate that I feel like I took her for granted and that she was there for me. But she knew I loved her, though. It was never a question of her loving me loving her. I didn't think that because she died so young. Ironically, she was the exact same age I am now. Her 55th birthday was coming up in August, and my 55th birthday is next month. So it's ironic that I am the exact same age when she passed away. So that's another reason why I'm so conscious of my life, very aware of life and death and how important each day is. And that's why I refuse to be a part of the world and some of the craziness. I refuse to lose myself in the chaos, and that's her influence. I'm not a follower. I am a leader. I'm a trendsetter, and I don't believe in certain things. And I don't, not to judge other people. We had our disagreements and we had our bouts, but she knew who I was. And we have to have people that in our lives that can tell us the truth. Sometimes get on our nerves and sometimes be bothersome because their intent is good. And whether they're a family member or a friend or, like I said, a Aunt Pam, pay homage to them give them their flowers while they're alive. Again, it might be your mom, your dad. And again, I think it's one of those things that, like Beyonce talking about her Uncle Johnny, Aunt Pam will always be an influence in everything that I do. The way I respect people, the way I honor the elderly, the way I can debate with someone and have a healthy debate. Like we would debate different things and she would understand my perspective. I would understand her perspective. And we would just agree to disagree. It wasn't about us. And I think as a black gay man, when I told her I was gay, I remember her asking me how serious I was about it. Like, are you ready to tell the world that? She said, would you go on Oprah and tell the world? And I said, yeah, I'm in that space. And she wasn't mean about it. She wasn't really, of course, she didn't want that for me, but she was very understanding about it. She really was. And once she read my poetry book, she was very, I felt like she knew me after that. Like she really got it. Like once she opened my book and got into my head, she knew what kind of black gay man I was, and I think she could see her influence in my work, and I think she needed to know, and I think it dispelled a lot of ignorance about the stereotypes of black gay men, and I think it made us closer. And again, I don't think I've had that relationship with anybody else, and I don't know. Actually, I don't think I've allowed myself to have that relationship with any other my other aunts and uncles. And to be honest, I always look at them as that they're not Aunt Pam. And I know they love me and they care, but it's a different relationship. And again, I think we all have to cherish the Aunt Pams in our lives. And like I said, it could be your grandmother. And the whole point is honoring the people that are influenced in our lives. I mean, she wasn't just a mentor. She really was like a second mom and a big sister, and heavily influenced my spiritual life. And she wanted me to have that relationship with God. Even though some days she fought me, like, but I think she just kept encouraging me to find my way, because I think she knew I was lost. I was angry. I was, again, sexually confused and really didn't know anything about dating. I mean, my heart was broken so many times and I wanted to tell her. And sometimes I think she knew, I think she knew certain things. And it, like I said, now, even as I miss her, even doing this podcast, and even if nobody listens to this podcast, even if they're like, oh, I don't want to hear about somebody's Aunt Pam, that's really on you. I just wanted to pay homage to her and to let the world know that she's still an influence in my life. And again, that we need to honor the people that believe in us. Because I think we really do dismiss people and take them for granted, that they're just there. The people that really, really root for us, to really encourage us. And I think if this podcast encourages you to pick up the phone and call your Uncle Johnny or your Aunt Pam, then I know I did the right thing. And segueing, I want to talk about my store, All Things Moetic. It's Pride Month and also Black Music Month, and I have a sale going on in my store, All Things 25% off for the month of June. So if you see anything in my store, get it now on sale. And also, if there's a print in there that you see that you can also buy it without the frame, just let me know. Email me. You can actually contact me in my store if you have a question about the product, the size, the frame. Just shoot me a text or email. And also about being a patron. If you go to my podcast main website, it's podbean.com, PODBEAN. You can be a patron and basically donate to my podcast, whatever you feel comfortable donating to my cause and to my platform. And I'm really proud of my platform. I try to do subjects that I think people will engage with. I'm not a celebrity gossip column. I'm not that guy. I try to speak on everyday experiences because I really do want to help people, even if it's one person at a time. And the one thing I know for sure, that I'm not alone in my experiences. You may feel alone sometimes. You may even feel loneliness, but I know I'm not alone. I know that I'm not. I know angels walk with me. I know God is with me. And I know the people that believe in me, no matter how small the group is, that's all I need. And I know I'm loved. I struggle sometimes, but to be honest, I'm really trying to get back to the man that I feel I've lost inside myself. So I feel like Aunt Pam is actually trying to help me get back to me again. and a happier place, a more peaceful place. And I'm getting closer, but I'm not beating myself up. I'm taking each day as it comes and learning to relax and just go with the flow of life, but also participate and enjoy the moments that and the people that we care about. And it's maybe more conscious and aware. So, anyway, I want to say thank you for listening. And as always, I pray life is treating you well wherever you are in the world, and that you got something today, and that you're closer to your dreams coming true. Thank you for listening.